Oh man, what a great season. You know what? Feeling pretty good. Maybe I should just continue on with CW for now. Just keep doing these DC show. Never mind. What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Superman and Lois Season 2, Episode 13, All is Lost. So we'll go ahead and get the negatives out of the way for this one, because for most of this episode, I was having a really good time. It was a really well done episode, but unfortunately, there are a couple of things that do irk me a little bit, and they're not necessarily bad, they're just things that I am not a fan of. Mostly with Lucy and Allie, unfortunately. I already talked about Allie a little bit this season, how she's just not the type of character that I like to see. Even though it's not a bad thing, she's not a bad character, it's just not my preference to see this type of villain who is so full of themselves, but then especially throwing Lucy in on the mix, who is somebody who has started following her, despite the fact that she is very clearly evil and doesn't really have a reason to trust her, outside of the fact that she's just shown her kindness whenever she felt like Lois and her dad were getting on top of her about stuff. That's kind of a weak motivation, in my opinion. And whenever they're having that talk with her and they're trying to tell her how much they love her and all of that, everything she throws back in Lois's face, it's stuff that she has convinced herself of. It's not like Lois did something awful that made her feel this way. It's Lois was trying to be a sister, trying to be there for her, trying to make sure she stays on the straight and narrow because she's a kid trying to look after her little sister. Of course, she's not always going to do everything right, but it's like Lucy took all of that, internalized it, and then convinced herself that Lois hated her. It's not really a great motivation for me. Because if Lois had actually done some stuff that was really bad or did something that maybe we could actually see how it affected Lucy, even though Lois might not have known at the time that that's how it was affecting her. But most of the stuff that Lucy brought up was just normal sister trying to look out for her little sister with no mom around. That's what it felt like. And none of what she brought up felt like it was really bad and really something that Lois maybe didn't know the full extent of what she did to her. So because of that, I'm not really sympathizing with Lucy here. I feel like they could have made me sympathize with her if they had given me a better reason to. But a lot of what she's doing is her own fault. It's her own mind convincing her of this stuff. And then, of course, Allie as well, convincing her of it and gaslighting her into trusting her. Which, of course, then leads to the scene whenever Lucy kind of gives Allie what she wants by bringing Superman there. And yeah, it's totally on Lucy. I'm actually really glad that they didn't do this with her dad whenever he's in the hospital bed. And she's like, it's all my fault. I was really worried he was going to be like, no, it's okay. It's not your fault. But he does say we all make mistakes, as in, yeah, it is your fault, but we can learn from this. We can learn from this mistake you made. So I was glad they didn't go the route of just not blaming her for what she did, because it was very clearly her fault. But for Allie, though, the problem I'm still having is I don't really get her motivation. Like, I know what she's trying to do. She's trying to merge the Bizarro world and the real world together, but I don't know why. You know, for her, it makes sense why she would want to merge with her other self, because look at what happened. She's become super powerful. But why does merging the two worlds together help her? What benefit does that give her? I do hope there is a good explanation there. I hope they have something that'll show us why she's trying to do this and what benefit she'll get. Because at the moment, it kind of feels like if everybody merges with their other self, it's not going to be best for her. Like, obviously, she has a lot of followers on that other world, so there will be a ton of people who become stronger that will be following her, but there's also going to be a lot of people that are not following her that might try to rise up and do something against her because they'll now have this power with their other selves. So I'm not entirely sure what the thinking is there, and that's where I'm still not really connected with her as a villain either, is I don't know what her purpose is. I don't know why she wants to do this to begin with, other than she just thinks it's what's best for the worlds, but I just don't know why she thinks that. I don't know what has convinced her that this will make everything better, or what better is in her mind. But now, looking at the positives, a couple of the standout scenes for me, because to be fair, there was a lot of good stuff in this one that I could go into for probably the next 20 minutes, but I'll try to keep it shorter. First of all, the scene with Jordan going to see Lana. I thought that was really well handled, because Lana is going a little over the top, and she admits that later to Kyle. But Jordan also, whenever he's talking to Clark, he does say, you know, I was wanting to tell Sarah, but it was for me. I wasn't thinking about what's best for her. So it really shows that while Lana maybe did go a little over the top with it, and she does admit that later, it does sort of help Jordan see I was wrong in the way I was thinking. Because he was wrong. He is a kid who thinks he's in love with this girl, thinks he knows what's best for her, but he really just wants to tell her so he can get back with her. And that's the only reason why he wants to tell her. He's not thinking about the consequences that could follow. I really do think, though, that was a very well-handled scene, and it also coincides with Lana's story in this one, where she is talking to Sarah, finds out she performed at the bar where, I can't remember her name now, but performs at that bar. She gets upset about it, but then later on she and Kyle get to talking, and she sort of realizes she should have been more happy for her daughter than thinking about herself and Kyle and the other woman and getting upset about that. So once again, it just feels like a very maturely handled story where there are the frustrations, there are the initial reactions that are incorrect. When you look back at it, whenever the characters look back at it, they sort of have that moment of clarity and go, wait a minute, maybe I should take a step back and look at the positives here. Yes, this is Kyle talking to that woman again. Yes, the woman is involved in getting my daughter this awesome opportunity, which does hurt me, but it's great for my daughter to get a chance to get her voice out there and get her songs heard and put onto a public platform as well. So it's kind of one of those, the good outweighs the bad. I thought the scene with them all eating at the diner together, the Cushing family, I thought it was a nice, sweet moment as well. The story with John and Natalie as well, thought was well handled. The initial, I don't want you out there because it'll put you in danger, but then realizing she is very capable. She's built this suit that's even better than his, which his reaction whenever Hetty told him that was fantastic. There actually, I will say, 3 really good comedic moments in this episode, because as much as everything's sort of going wrong right now and Allie is in full power, Superman has been stopped for now, he might be human now, there's a lot of stuff about this that does feel very, everything's about to go really, really bad, and she's merging the two worlds together. Who knows what problems that'll cause. At the same time, there were some really great comedic moments, because that was really funny. The 2 moments that, in my opinion, were the laughs in old for me, because you got Lana talking to Sarah, like, I got my own Alanis Morissette in the house. Who's that? Oh, God, is that gray hair? Oh, my Lord. And then whenever Clark and Jordan get done with him flying for the first time, it's like, all right, I'm going to take you on this other one. I like to call it the Kessel Run. What's that? Oh, God. This poor young generation, they're not going to know. They're not going to know the amazingness. Some of them should. I'm going to make sure my kids, whenever I have them, I'm going to make sure they know. They know about the Kessel Run. Alanis Morissette, I mean, if they're girls, maybe. If I have daughters, I might show them Alanis Morissette, because not really for guys. But I do think that's very important, though, because this is a quote that's been thrown around a lot. I'm pretty sure it's Joss Whedon who said it. It's like, you can make them feel, you can make them cry, you can do, I don't remember the first part of it. It's like, but at the end of the day, tell a joke. I don't really remember there being a whole lot of jokes this season. It doesn't feel like this is a comedic show, but I do feel like there are some moments of levity. There are some moments where you kind of feel that lightheartedness that these characters can have. And those moments are so welcome. Whenever there's a lot of stuff that's going wrong, you just have these brief moments that you can look back on and you can laugh about how funny it was. I feel like as the audience, it makes us feel a lot better about this show. And I think it helps you connect with the characters as well, that they have these more human moments about them. I do think that's about it for this one, though. Everything else, like I said, that if I didn't talk about it, it was well done. Nothing really great or awful to say. It was just good. So 2 episodes left. We're going to get through this. See you guys in the next one in just a sec. And now episode 14, World's War Bazaar. Looking at it, my brain kept reading World Wars Bazaar, and I had to really focus in and say, no, World's War. It makes sense because there are 2 worlds and they're kind of at war and one's bizarre. Anyways, this one was fine. It's kind of just progressing the story a little bit. There is a lot of focus on kind of that feeling of helplessness from Superman, from Jordan, from Jonathan, from Natalie. You've got all these characters that are kind of feeling sorry for themselves, feeling like they can't help, or in Natalie's case, being told that they're not allowed to help. And then Lana, of course, dealing with trying to figure out how to handle all this information that's being given to her by Lois and whether she should tell everybody in town or not. So a lot of it was not the most fun to sit through. Very much like I've been saying, how you've got very much kind of just that feeling of everything's going wrong, and you kind of want things to get better soon. So hopefully next episode ends on a bit more of a happy note, a bit more enjoyment, a bit more excitement. But just to go through a couple of the scenes that stood out to me. First of all, the scene between Kyle and Lana, I thought was really well handled. Just the conversations they had, talking about Kyle's secret that he kept from her and all of that. I think they did a good job of really having Kyle laid out on the table. He knew what he was doing was wrong, and he felt bad about it. And I feel like a lot of times, anytime somebody is keeping a secret after they've made a mistake like this, it's more so from that mindset of they feel guilty, and they feel like maybe I can hide the secret. Maybe I can just keep them from finding out, and that way I don't have to feel bad about it anymore, and I can pretend like it never happened. But the fact of the matter is, like Lana said, everybody finds out. It's always going to get found out. But I do like how they sort of made that parallel with Lana finding out what's going on with this bizarro world from Lois, and she's trying to figure out whether or not she keeps it a secret from everybody else, and talking to Kyle, who obviously kept his secret for a long time, and just trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. And it is a difficult decision. I even like the question she asked at the beginning, where she's like, would you rather not know what's going on and live peacefully, or would you rather know the truth but then have to live in worry? And I do think there's a lot of good parallels that can be drawn to what we're going through in our current world, where sometimes it does feel like secrets are being kept. How many of those secrets are for our benefit? How many of them are for the people who are keeping the secret? How many of them are for their benefit? There's a lot of questions to be asked about. For instance, there are probably plots being made every day to destroy this country, to attack our country. How many of those get stopped and we just don't even know about them? Because if we knew, we would be panicking because we know we're under attack. So I do really like that conversation. I think it was very well handled, and it did set up for, I think Lana and Kyle are starting to find that connection again. And even though Lana has a lot going on, I do think it looks like she's trying to make that reconciliation there. Of course, this does lead to also Sarah finds out about Jordan in this episode, and that does cause a little bit of a rift between her and Lana, which we can't really focus on right now because obviously everything's going wrong and the world's starting to end. Now, while I am on the topic of the worlds merging together, I do have some questions about that, because it seems like Kyle disappeared while the merging was happening, because we were seeing all of this stuff from the other world come into this world, which I don't really know if that makes sense. If the worlds are merging, I feel like it would be a combination of the two. We'd see some of the buildings are merging, some things inside the building are merging, and some things aren't. Some things are staying the same, because if you're merging it together, there should be a combination. It feels like, though, everything in this world is becoming the stuff from the other world. The buildings are becoming the buildings from the other world. The coffee cups are becoming the coffee cups from the other world. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to show what this merging is causing, but it doesn't make sense. If it's merging, then the coffee cup should be some sort of mixture. I'll use my coffee cup as an example. Maybe it's shaped like this, like it normally is, but maybe like the handle is a square, like it is in the other world. Or maybe for like the Kent household, since the Kent house in the other world is destroyed, maybe half of it is destroyed or parts of it are destroyed, but other parts are okay. There are rooms in the building that are trash, but then other rooms that are what it looks like in our world. It just feels like they basically went, let's just make it look like the other world, so that way we can really show the audience, hey, this is what's happening. And I feel like it doesn't make logical sense, if that makes sense. But also, Kyle disappears, seemingly. And I'm assuming that's because the Kyle in the other world is either dead or doesn't exist. If that is the case, it is weird that he's disappeared, but yet Sarah and I don't remember Sarah's sister's name now. It's kind of sad, but they're still there. And I'm assuming that they don't exist in the other world, since Lana and Tal-Rho were a couple and not Lana and Kyle. So I don't know how that makes sense that Kyle disappears, but they're still there. If that is what happened, and maybe they are about to disappear, but why have him disappear, but then they're still there? So I do feel like there are some things that don't make sense with this ending and having some of the stuff merged together, but it is supposed to build up tension and build up this sense of dread as Allie is completing her goals. So I get the idea. I just think it was executed maybe a little, I'm trying to think of the right word, almost hyperbolic in a way. Like they really wanted to show how bad this was, so they went over the top with it to the sense where now it doesn't really make sense if you think about what is the merging supposed to do. It's supposed to bring the two worlds together, not the bizarro world suddenly is now that's your world. You're just living on the bizarre world. Outside of that, there's not really too much to talk about. I will say, as much as some of the down and depressed stuff in this episode got to be a little much, and I was starting to be like, okay, can we just turn this around now, please? Because I'm having like 3 or 4 scenes in a row of these characters just, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm supposed to help people. There's so much of it going on. In its defense, the Clark thing totally makes sense. This is the first time that he's felt truly powerless to help. He has not been able to save people. And that's a lot to go through for somebody who has had the ability to help people for so long. Even if he was facing somebody that maybe was stronger than him, he still had the powers. He still had the ability to fight back. Now he doesn't. Now these people are way stronger than he is. He doesn't have his powers anymore. It's a lot to go through. So it makes sense for him to be in this mood, but I'm glad that we had a moment where he had the ability to help, even if it's not with his powers. As Superman, he has the ability to inspire people. It is a little on the nose, it is a little cheesy, but I think it's a good message. People standing together, a town coming together and working together. We saw it a little bit in the first season too. I think it's a good, strong message to send, especially considering where we are now. That idea, even having the former mayor there, he's still a part of the town too. He is still somebody that they need to work with. And I don't know if he's going to be involved in this final episode, but it would be nice if we really had him sort of change his attitude after all this is said and done. I don't know if he's going to, because he does seem to be just the pantomime villain in the town. But I think that would be a nice moment to have him sort of see what's going on, see what Lana's doing, see how the town coming together is important, and realize he's been kind of a douche this season. Maybe not fully changed, but maybe start to take a step back and go, maybe the way I've been handling things, maybe the way I've been looking at things, maybe it is a little bit skewed. Maybe I am wrong in some ways. The problem is, though, I don't know how realistic that would be, because typically people who have that point of view, they don't change. Somebody who is that full of himself typically stays that way because he doesn't want to admit that he's wrong. But we'll see what they decide to do with him. For Allie, though, I still am waiting to see what her motivations are, why she thinks this is a good idea, what convinced her of this. There is still a lot that I don't know there. So I'm hoping we get some of those answers in the final episode. And I did want to throw in a little shout out because I thought the fight scene in this one with Jordan and Lana, and then eventually the Bizarro Jonathan there, and then Natalie shows up. I thought that fight scene was pretty well handled. It was enjoyable. I like the finisher as well from Jonathan with the hammer. It's pretty badass. I guess I will discuss real quick the John Henry and Natalie stuff. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. On the one hand, I get it from his point of view, but we also did just have last episode where we did have that disconnect and she wanted to help, and finally he realized that she could. On the one hand, I understand, because he realizes it might be a suicide mission to go in there and go after Allie with how powerful she is. So I get him not wanting her to be there with him and to possibly get killed along with him. And as we saw, she was there to help out and save the Kent family from being attacked. I understand his point of view, but I also do feel like we've kind of gone backwards a little bit in that story. It really is tough because he's right and he's also wrong. I feel like it's one of those, if nothing had happened, if they hadn't been attacked and if she hadn't helped out with Jordan, I don't know how I would have felt about it. I think because of that attack, I do feel like I'm leaning more toward, you made a good decision, John. But I do feel like that's something that the writing in the show does a good job of, is it makes you kind of question. Makes you question who's right, who's wrong, what would you do in that situation. And I do think that's something that is kind of unique to this show, because most of the time I feel like I'm always siding with one or the other. In like The Flash, when I was watching Legends of Tomorrow, back when Arrow was on, I feel like it was pretty simplistic when you looked at it, and it was very easy to say, all right, well, they're in the right, they're in the wrong. In this show, it's kind of hard. I put myself in both characters' shoes and I go, well, I could see their point, but I can also see their point. Obviously outside of the villains, of course, but that's why they're the villains. But I think that's a good sense of how good the writing is on the show. Is it makes you question, it makes you wonder, what would you do in this situation? Who would you side with? Or would you side with either one, or just say, hey, you both have your good points, I don't know what I'd do. I think that's probably the best thing I can say about it, is its writing is really good and it's making me think. And that's something not a lot of shows do nowadays. But with that being said, we're into the finale. I hope it ends on a happy note. We'll see what happens, but I'll see you guys in just a sec. And now, episode 15, Waiting for Superman. It's a pretty solid finale. The only thing that I will have a slight issue with is actually the exact opposite problem that I have with The Flash right now, which is the lack of explanation. Because in The Flash, there's too much explanation. They exposit all over the place. It's ridiculous amount of talking about, all right, here's what's going on. All right, well, here's what I'm going to do, and this is how it's going to work, and this is how it's going to fix everything. All right, well, here, this person go do this, and that'll fix this. Too much. It's way, way too much, and it kills my brain cells. This one, stuff just sort of happened, and there's kind of a general explanation, but nothing that really makes sense in my mind. And all has to do with Clark getting his abilities back and then stopping Allie. Because I understand the fact you throw him into the sun, it kind of supercharges him, and that gives him a power up, and he's strong enough now to take down Allie. I don't really understand. First of all, I guess absorbing his power was too much. It's almost like it was overwhelming her in a way. So that kind of makes sense in my mind. I don't know how he was able to just split her apart. I don't know how that makes sense. I don't know if maybe he somehow bounced back, absorbed some of her powers, and so that gave him the ability to split her where she had the power to bring things together. And then he just uses that same power, I guess, to hit the earth and then split it apart. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's something that I was kind of hoping maybe at least one line just to explain, hey, so how did you do that? Well, when Allie tried to absorb my powers, it gave me some of hers. Just something like that, so that way I could kind of confirm what's going on. But as it stands, I'm just kind of sitting here going, all right, but how? I need a little bit of an explanation, please. But right off the bat, I mean, this episode, it started with explaining some of the issues that I had at the last episode, where why was some of the stuff merging, but it all seemed like it was the other world was coming here. Well, as it turns out, actually, it was kind of going both ways, where the Kent family and Natalie, they ended up on the Bizarro world with some of their stuff coming with them, but not all of it. So that's why the house looked like the Bizarro world house, is because they went to that world. And it makes sense. For Kyle, he disappeared, but not because he doesn't exist on this other world. It's because he got transported over there, but Lana and the girls did not. Because that's how it was working. Some people were getting transported over, some were not. It was kind of glitching back and forth a little bit. It worked. It set up for some intense scenes. You got planes crashing because I'm guessing pilots disappeared to the other world. The one car nearly hit Lana and Sarah because its driver disappeared. It worked. I don't know why that was happening, but made enough sense to me, I think. Lois telling Chrissy about Clark being Superman. This is one that I'm not sure about. Because as I said before, I think the whole giving up the superhero's identity to all these different people. I hate how all of the CW shows did that, because it just felt like the secret identity almost didn't matter. For Oliver in season 1 and 2 of Arrow, it was like only the people that started working with him did he tell. And then it just felt, at one point he just revealed to everybody he was the Green Arrow. And yes, some of it was people were finding out, people suspected him of it, but it just kind of felt like at some point he said, you know what, screw it. Barry, it feels like he tells almost everybody, whether they're working with the team or whether it's the chief of police. It just feels like it's everybody gets to know now. Everybody gets to find out. And there's just way too many people that know. There's way too many people that have discovered his secret identity. So now with Superman, obviously they told Lana, but then Sarah found out, and now Chrissy knows. And I just don't really know how I feel about that. I will say it made me laugh. Clark and Lois were dancing and Chrissy was looking at him. That was a good scene. I like that. I like Clark's line, she's been looking at me like that all day. And then Lois, yeah, we're going to have to work on that. That was funny. I did appreciate the humor behind it. But it is somebody else now that knows. And also, as much as they've talked about journalism and telling the truth and all of that stuff this season, telling her means now she's going to have this difficulty doing her job whenever she knows the truth about what's going on with Clark. I don't really know how I feel about it. I feel like I'm worried now that this show is going to start getting a little willy-nilly with his secret identity and just telling others about it. And I don't want it to be that way. And I like it better when the superhero keeps their identity secret, because the more people that know, the more ways that supervillains can figure out their secret identity. If somehow somebody finds out, Sarah, Lana, Chrissy, they know who Superman is, and they need to find out, if they're a villain that wants to find out, well, go after them. And now that's more people that you have to worry about protecting. So maybe season 3, we'll have some moments like that show why sharing that secret is dangerous and why that can hurt people. And if they don't end up doing that, I will be a little disappointed because the show has shown such a good ability to show both sides and to show why certain things are the way they are, even if we don't necessarily like them. So to not show the other side of this, to not show why that secret is kept and why it is important to not tell all these people, if they don't show that, I feel like they're ignoring that side of the problem. Not to do too much more comparing, but I relate it to, on The Flash right now, one of the team members, Chester, he is sharing this technology on his live streams that he does. He's sharing all this scientific technology that he's working on for the Flash and 4-Star Labs with the public, and somebody creates something that nearly hurt people. They evacuated the building, but they were testing something that nearly hurt all these people if they were still there. But of course, the person who did it was doing it for a good reason. And it feels like that's all they're focusing on with this, is like, oh, you should share all this information to the public because everybody has the right to know, and not focusing on the idea that there are people out there that would use what he's showing to hurt people. They're ignoring that. So same way here, if we just ignore the problems that would come with sharing a secret like Clark being Superman, if we just ignore all of that, it feels like you're just conveniently ignoring the other argument, the other side of the argument. Some of the other epilogue stories that popped up. First of all, the thing with Diggle and John Henry. I don't know what that's going to be about. Probably setting up for something in season 3. The fact that Diggle is here is also a little weird. I know he was in season 1, but we now know this is not the same John Diggle, because Sam even says in this one that Superman's the only hero that's on this Earth, which means this is not the same Earth as the CW shows, which doesn't really make sense when you consider what Crisis was supposed to do. I don't know. It just feels like the writers conveniently ignored what Crisis was supposed to be. I mean, to be fair, so is The Flash. They're just constantly doing all the time travel and stuff, which should be creating all these parallel worlds, but of course it's not going to, because reasons, I guess. But in this case, I think it's more so they wanted to distance themselves from the Arrowverse, so it's like, we've created our own world. And yet Diggle will still show up sometimes. Don't really know why. But hey, if he's able to get some work, I guess that's cool for him. I will say the fact that John Henry and Natalie are both okay at the end of all of this, I don't really know how I feel about that. It did feel like they both sort of went on a last-ditch effort to try to save the world, and they both just made it out okay. It does sort of feel like that's a little too easy, because both of them felt like very last we're about to die type of moments. Whenever John was getting into the suit and leaving Natalie behind, and whenever Natalie was talking to him at the end when Allie showed up to kill them both, it kind of felt like something bad was about to happen. And then, nope, John's okay. Superman shows up just in time and saves both of them. They're both okay. It feels a little too easy for me. It feels like there are no consequences for actions in those scenes. And the show did feel like it wasn't quite as willing to make choices like that. It felt like they were a little bit more willing to have people die because of consequences, because of the decisions they made. You know, we saw with Henderson in this one, or in this season. So I'm not upset that they're both still alive. Like, I think they're both good characters, and I'm glad we'll continue to see them. But there is kind of that feeling of, well, just because somebody is talking as if they're going to die doesn't necessarily mean they're going to die. Probably going to be okay. Jordan and Sarah connecting at the end of all of it, I thought it was fine. The conversation they had, Sarah finally apologizing for what happened, because she never really did apologize. She just basically was just trying to make everything feel like it was all okay. Like nothing was changing when it did for her. And of course, Jordan now getting to talk to her about his abilities, I think, does make him happy. And her finding out, I didn't really talk about it in the last episode, but I do like how all of that went down. It felt very natural with Bizarro Lana showing up and Jordan having to reveal his powers to get Lana and Sarah to safety. Maybe a little scripted, but at least it was not just him telling her because he's young and dumb and thinks he's in love and thinks that she is the one. It was very much she kind of had to find out in that moment, or else she would have died. The final thing, though, with Kyle and Lana, it does sort of feel like this is possibly the end of their relationship. I don't know if they're going to get divorced or not, but it does sort of feel like Lana, as much as Kyle has worked to win back her trust, it does feel like for her, it's just not going to be the same. And whether that means they're going to have to split up or not, I don't know. And I guess we'll probably have a little bit more of that in season 3, and we'll find out where both of them are headed. But for Kyle, I think a lot of it was he was just hoping if he could just win back her trust, everything would be fine. They could get back to being a family again. But it is tougher than that. Whenever cheating does happen, whenever an affair happens, it's not just as easy as, all right, we're good. And like I said before, I think it is a very mature stance to take, where a lot of the other CW shows would just have some sort of bullshit. Oh, you know what? I wasn't sure, but I feel like I can trust you again. And then they just work things out and everything would be hunky dory. For this, if they are going to be able to be together again, be husband and wife again, it is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of work. And it still hasn't really been that long. Probably only a few months, maybe, since she found out. So again, I do appreciate the maturity of it. I do appreciate that it's not easy. I am surprisingly interested to see where that story goes in season 3. I think honestly the Cushings for me probably the most surprising thing about this show, because I really didn't think I'd care about them, and yet here I am, and I am concerned about what's going to happen to them for season 3. And I think a lot of that is just down to, you have the Kent family dealing with a lot of the superhero stuff, a lot of how do we handle one of our sons getting powers, how do we handle them knowing about my secret of being a superhero, and how do we handle trying to deal with saving the world on top of all of this while trying to get them through school. There's a lot of stuff going on there that some of it is relatable, but a lot of it is, this is superheroes trying to deal with our everyday lives, and how would they handle that? The Cushings are very much dealing with real problems. Outside of the mayoral stuff, they are dealing with problems that all of us can relate to, or at least stuff that even if we haven't gone through it ourselves, it feels normal, and it's interesting to see what they're doing in this situation. So I think that's what I kind of appreciate about it, is in all of this craziness, the worlds colliding, all these superheroes and supervillains, and all of that going on, you have the Cushing family that are kind of in the middle of it because of their close connection to the Kent family, but they're dealing with the more human problems right now. And I think that's what makes them interesting to me, at least. Final thing to talk about before I wrap up is Allie, because we did get a little bit of an explanation with her. Whenever Lois went to talk to her at the end, with the two of herselves in the DOD, we did get a little bit of an explanation for why she was doing what she was doing. At the end of it all, she was trying to merge the two worlds because she believed everybody would be the best version of themselves if they became whole with their other self. That was her goal at the beginning. That's what she believed would happen. And what I find interesting about that is that that's basically it. She really wasn't looking to get more power. She really wasn't looking to rule anything. In her mind, that was going to be the best for everybody, was to merge the two worlds together. Once she merged, she realized how bad it was. And I find it interesting that ultimately the reason why she was so focused on completing this, even though she realized what she'd become, because I wasn't sure if she did. I wasn't sure if she really fully still believed what she was saying or not after she merged together. But Lois finds out in this one, it's more so she didn't want to be the only one that was merged together. She didn't want to be alone in that state of being. So I'm glad they at least gave me that. It gave me something that I could hold on to and say, all right, so she was a little crazy. She did believe this whole idea about becoming whole and how that would be best for everybody. By the end of it, it became less about she believed it still. It was more so about she just wanted everybody to join her. So I am glad they at least gave me that, because I was worried it was just going to be about her beliefs. And if that was the case, I just feel like that wasn't really strong enough, because ultimately I didn't understand what that would accomplish for her. I didn't understand how that would benefit her. I'm glad I can now see what the benefits were in her mind originally and at the end of it as well. But with all that being said, looking back on season 2, I thought it was a very good season. Not quite as strong as the first season for me, and I think a lot of that is just down to my own personal preferences. I think some of the story with Allie, with Lucy, some of the decisions that were made by the characters this season, I feel like I was not as big of a fan of those. They were not bad, but I don't think I personally like those stories nearly as much as a lot of the stories that we saw in the first season. I think overall, the maturity is still very much there. The decision-making from the characters does feel realistic. The effects, the sound design, all of that, the music was really well done. I did have a little bit at the beginning of the last video where I realized I forgot to talk about the sound design, but I really liked going to the other world and seeing how that world worked, everything being backwards, the speak being backwards, the sound and the music being backwards as well. A lot of that was really, really interesting. A final comparison to The Flash, but whenever Barry went into the Still Force, I feel like that world was very bland. It was basically just paint everything with a coat of green and then have everything standing still or stuck in a loop because it's not moving forward. I just didn't feel like visiting this other world was that interesting. Visiting the Bizarro world I thought was really well done in this one. I feel like that was probably some of my favorite stuff in this season was getting to see that world. On that note, I did forget to mention about Tal going over there. First of all, him giving the trucks to Jonathan and Jordan, hilarious scene. I was dying laughing both at their reaction but also at Clark's reaction to the trucks. But him being over there, I don't really know what that's supposed to be about. I guess for him, because he's always wanted to rule, so maybe in his mind, this is his way of having that opportunity on a world where there is no superhero anymore. But I don't really know how that's supposed to work because, I mean, in this other world, he's not going to be as strong. The red sun is going to make him weaker. There's a bunch of kryptonite instead of the X-kryptonite, which is also going to make him weaker. So I don't really know how that's going to work out for him, and I don't know if we'll see him next season or in the fourth season at all. But if that is going to be kind of the end of his story, is just him being over there and being amongst those people, so that way he doesn't have to live on a world where he tried to take over and destroy it, basically, then I think it's a nice wrap up for him. I thought the end of his story, helping Clark get his powers back, which also, on that note, how did he fly Clark to the sun, since Clark was supposed to be kind of human at that point? How was Clark able to survive in space? I don't know if that makes sense. But anyways, we did see, though, he had that turnaround, and I was happy for him in that sense. And again, I do think it goes to show that for this season and for the show in general, they do a good job of even taking characters like Anderson, somebody who I absolutely despised, and I had no interest in seeing him anymore after he disappeared through the portal. By the end of it, I felt bad for him, because ultimately he still had his reasons too. They showed his side of things, and I was able to sort of relate to that. Now, with that being said, we have had mostly characters with good ambitions, with good reasons for why they're doing stuff. We've not seen a whole lot of villains that are just purely evil on this show. And I will say I am hoping to see that at some point. I am hoping to see a villain that, I don't know, either is just wants everything to die or just wants to rule. I just want somebody who maybe is a little bit darker as a villain for either next season or the final season, because that's something that is kind of normal in fiction now in general, is just the idea that even some of the best villains, they have their reasons. They have something that makes them sympathetic. I don't always want to sympathize with the villains, though. Sometimes the best villains are the ones that don't have a sympathetic backstory but are just evil. And there are certain people in the world that exist like that. So those are just my thoughts on it. What did you think? Let me know down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these final 3 episodes as well as season 2 as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Superman and Lois. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of other reviews on there as well as some Let's Plays, so check those out if you have time. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.